Be working on a final project, and this is really just a chance to review what we've covered in some of our previous units. And so you can choose one of the units that we've done and kind of focus on that. And you'll basically get to redo or create a new version of a project using one of these softwares, and then combine that with the website project that we did a couple weeks ago. And so the basic idea is to create a website with a story that uses some type of embedded media. So you can, this is totally up to you what you want to do. Students have done all sorts of different types of projects in the past. So if you want to keep working on something that you did previously and add to it, or if you have a new idea for a story that you're interested in telling, it doesn't have to be necessarily like a long or involved story, but just the idea of some type of story that you want to tell through media. So for the format, we're going to use a website, and we're going to embed some media in the website. We've already looked at how to create a website and add images to a website, but what we haven't really talked about is how to add video or HTML to a website. Not HTML, audio. So I'll go over that in a moment. And so you don't have to include all of these things, but you have to have at least 2 elements. So 2 elements could be 2 images, it could be 1 animation in 1 image, it could be 2 pieces of audio, any combination of 2 elements. And you have to use one of our software things that we've used this semester. So Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, or Audacity. And when you submit the project, you have to include the edit files, just like we've done for previous projects. So if you make a couple images in Photoshop or Illustrator, you're going to have to submit the PSD or AI file. If you do some more audio editing, you'll have to submit your Audacity files. Any original edit files you use to create the content needs to be submitted along with the website. So a couple of examples as like sort of starting off points. These, you don't have to choose one of these examples, but if you need a sort of prompt to get started, you could do a comic book. So you could create either image composites, or you could create illustrations in Illustrator, and then string the images together on your website, either going down the page or going across multiple pages. You could do an animation in After Effects and put that on a website. So you might make an animation about some character or something that you're interested in, some topic, and then have that embedded on the website along with some text information. Maybe you have a couple different videos. Another example is doing a series of interviews. This is a good one for a website because you can have multiple clips of audio and then have introductions to each one in text, and then have the audio there for people to listen to. So that's another example. Again, you can really do whatever you want, so you can be very creative here, but those are a few examples of places where you could sort of get started. And then we're gonna make sure to follow all of the same rules that we've been following throughout the semester. So if you're using images or audio or video from other sources, they should be Creative Commons or public domain, and you should include the licensing information for those sources. In terms of what we're actually going to submit, there's a template for a creative brief, so you can see that here. And this is pretty straightforward. You're just going to put in your name, the name of your project, and then the project description. So that has a few components: the story that you're telling, what type of media you're planning to use, the general approach or style or emotion that you're going for, and then the software that you use to create the project. And this is really just to kind of prompt you to think through all the stuff that you're going to need to do to create everything for the final project. I have some creative brief printouts here, so if you want to have a printout and fill it out by hand, you can take one of those. If you want to just fill it out on your computer, you can do that as well, but you'll have to submit that on Blackboard. So then, as I mentioned, all of the master files for any media that you create, so PSD for Photoshop, AI for Illustrator, AE for After Effects, or AUP3 for Audacity, Those are the main things that we've covered. And then finally, you're going to have an Open Lab post as usual. You're going to have a link to your project on Replit, a link to your code on Replit, just like we did for the website and for the Mad Libs, your description as usual, and then any attribution that you have used for it. There's a grading rubric here, which is also on Blackboard, and so you can see everything that's required and their point values and everything that we're going to work on. And we'll take a look at the final versions of these in 2 weeks. And so we'll present them in class. We'll take a look at what you created. So on the 18th, that'll be the last day of class. We'll take a look at them maybe in the middle of class in case people have bugs or need to get stuff fixed. Maybe we'll look at them around 2 or 3, and then we'll have more class time on that day for people to kind of wrap things up, finish anything that you are still working on. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly cover how do we embed media into our page, how do we get started with this project, and then we'll go into some workshop time. So we are going to create a website, so I'm going to go over to Replit. And you can either get started with a blank template, or you could copy and paste, or you could fork one of your website projects. So I'm going to go into my folder here, and I'm just going to create a new project. So you could, if you like the style that you set up for one of your other projects, you could just clone or fork one of these projects. So you could go to Web Final and fork. But I'm just going to get started with a new template. So I'm going to create a REPL here. And I'm just going to use the HTML, CSS, JS template here. One thing I would sort of remind people is that there is this template, this other version of this that has auto refresh built in. A couple of people have, I think, either used that by mistake or didn't just clicked on that one and have been having some issues with that one. So I would recommend not using that one. It does work and it does do some useful things, but it's hard to set up and it's hard to get it to work correctly. So I would ignore the auto refresh, just use the regular HTML, CSS, JavaScript template. We can give this a title, we can call it Final Project, and then click Create REPL. And so this will get you started with some templates and it'll kind of build out the website a little bit. And so I'm going to get rid of this little button here first. So I'll just have my hello world. Unless you're doing something with JavaScript, like if you're adding a Mad Libs component to this, you're probably not going to need JavaScript. If you do want to do more programming, you can do like another Mad Lib style thing, or you could create something like that and replace that with your media. If you're interested in doing something like that, that's fine as well. But I'm going to assume that we're not going to be using the script, so I'm just going to delete this. And I'll go ahead and delete this JavaScript file as well. And so I'm just going to really quickly set this up. So this is a little bit of review. But what I really want to go over is how do we put media in here. So I'm just going to make a quick div ID for a container so I can center my content and style this up just a little bit. Let me turn my font size up a little bit. Where's the settings? Okay. Okay, so depending on what your project is, you're gonna want to kind of introduce your project. I'll put a header here and say Final Project, but you should really come up with your own name for this. So whatever project you're doing, come up with a name that fits the project. So I'll say Final Project Name here. And so then we're going to have either some text or some content. And so I'll go over how to embed a couple different types of media. So you know how to do images. That's really easy, but let's review it anyway. And I'm going to make a folder here and just call this media. And so any type of media that we want to embed on the page, we can put right here. And you can also use multiple pages if you want. We've already covered that, so I'm not going to go over it now, but just to say that. Okay, so I'll just say, I'll make a paragraph and say this is examples of embedding different types of media. And I'm just going to use my previous projects as an example here, but obviously you're going to be creating new pieces of media. So you cannot use previous things that you've submitted unless you make substantial changes to those. If you want to keep working with those ideas, that's fine, but you have to make new versions of them. Okay, so let's start with an image. Okay, so I'll put a little paragraph and say an image. And so when we want to embed an image, we just use the img tag. This is going to have a source file, and that's it. We don't have a closing tag. We do need some alt text. And so this is going to be my self-portrait. So for my alt text, I'll just put self-portrait. But the main thing I need in here is just a source file. And so I need to upload this to my media folder. So I'm going to go to my Finder and go to my class folder. And for this one, I'm going to use, let's see, I have this pigeon image. So I'll just use that. So I'm going to grab this and just drag it over here and upload it here. You can also click on this guy and click Upload File to go through the File Explorer or the Finder. And now I just have to add the image source here. So remember, when I'm adding a source to a piece of media or another HTML file, I need to start with the folder because I'm on the main project folder on index.html. So I'm going to put in media, and then I'm going to start typing self-portrait, and Replit is making the suggestion because it can see in there, and so I'm just going to accept their suggestion, self-portrait export 4 .jpg. And so that's how we embed an image. That's pretty easy. So let's continue and add a couple other files. So we have an image. Let's add some audio. So let's say audio. And so for this one, I'm just going to upload my audio portrait of a place that I created a few weeks ago. So I'll go back to the Finder and go to my audio portrait. And the final version is, I could use either the MP3 or the OGG file. You probably don't want to use the WAV file because that's going to be the largest file size. So I'm just going to use the MP3 file. I'm going to drag that into my media folder. And you can see that recognize an audio project. So embedding audio in HTML is pretty easy. We just make a tag called audio. I don't know why image is abbreviated and audio is not. It's just how the standard developed over time. But our audio, just like our image, has a source. So we say src, and then we just link it to that audio file. So we are going to go to the media folder, and I'm just going to type in the first couple characters, and Replit's going to suggest the rest. And so I just click that. You can double check there. But one thing that's a little bit different with audio, so I have my source here. So I'm going to reload this and scroll down. Notice that we don't see it, even though it is there. So if I go to my Elements tab, there's my audio source, but it's not on the page. And so one of the things that we need to do with audio, because you can play audio in the background on a web page, we need to tell the HTML that we want the user to be able to control the audio themselves. And this is very easy to do. We just type in this parameter called controls. And we don't even have to set like equals to anything. We literally just type this parameter, and that's it. So once I put controls in there, when I refresh, you're going to see the default audio player. There's other ways you could do this. Like you could upload your audio to SoundCloud and embed a SoundCloud player in here if you wanted to. But just to simply add an audio file into our HTML page, this is all we need to do. And this has controls for the user, so they can hit play. And they can download the file, they can change the playback speed, they can change the volume. So those are just the default HTML controls. Okay, so the process for a video file is basically the exact same thing. So let's do our animation. So I'm going to make another paragraph here. Although actually we have to close this audio file. I always forget this. And this is sort of, this is a little bit of a tangent, but the reason we have to close audio and not image, this doesn't really happen very often, but back in the day before we had more advanced computers, sometimes your browser wouldn't support audio. Audio is kind of like a new feature for a while. And so what you would actually put in between these audio tags would be something like, this is an audio file, your browser does not support audio. Something like that, just to let the user know that there should be something there, but if your browser doesn't support audio, that's why you're not seeing anything. And so when I refresh this, notice that that text doesn't show up at all on the page. Since the audio did load, it just ignores that text. So certain elements that were introduced later in HTML that weren't part of the first HTML standard will have that type of fallback. Okay, so finally we have video, and this is for our animation files. This one is almost exactly the same as audio. We're just going to say video and then source, and we're going to also close this video, and we'll say the same thing here, but you know, you're probably never going to see this unless you try to load this page on like a computer from like 1997 or something like that. Okay, so let's find our animation and upload this. So I'm going to go to my animated emotion. You're definitely going to want to use the MP4 version of this, not the MOV. The MOV will not play in the browser. So if you need help with that, we can go over it. But I'm just going to grab my MP4 and upload that there. And so now I need to go into my media folder and grab that main.mp4. And so now we will see that video. Notice that it's very, very large and we can't do anything with it. So we're going to fix a couple things here. But the first thing we can do is say controls. Just like our audio project, this will give us the default video controls. The next thing is we can actually set the width and the height of the video. We'll do that. Let's see if we can do that with CSS first. Okay, so now we have all our content. I'm just going to review some really basic CSS just so this looks a little less weird, and then we'll be done. So I've uploaded, or I've embedded all of the different types of media that I can use. And of course, you can have multiple videos, you can have multiple clips of audio, you can put paragraphs in between them, you can do all the other HTML stuff that you've done before. So let's open up our style.css. I'm just going to throw a container in here. And I'm going to say width is, say, 640 pixels. I'm doing a pretty small width because I'm always using this projector where the resolution is very low. A more typical width for a website might be something like 960 or even 1240 or 1280. For a really big one, you might do like 1440, something like that. I'm going to do 640, and I'm going to do margin is 0 auto to center my website. And so this looks a little bit better, but it's not quite right because my media is still very big. So let's fix that. So let's go here and let's say container and then space img. So this is any image that's inside of a container. This is our nested selector. I'm going to say width is 100%. That is going to set the width of my image to match the width of my website. Okay, so now that looks much better. Let's fix our video. So we can try the same thing with our video. We can say container video, and width is 100%. We may need to do more, but that actually looks not so bad. Let's see if we can play this. Okay, that looks pretty decent. So there we go. So we're going to want to not only embed the media on the page, but also use CSS to make sure that the media is visible at our various resolutions. So you can test this on your computer. I'm using 640 again because the resolution is very low. But if we click on this container and I just increase the width here, the higher you have the width, the more of that content you're going to be able to see on the page. So you can play around with that and get something that works for you. Of course, you also want to change the background color and the typography and all those other things, but we've already covered that in our previous lessons, so I'm not going to review that here. I think that's everything. So when you submit the final project, you're going to either download the creative brief, or you know, take a picture of it if you're filling it out on a piece of paper. You're going to have your website where the URL is just going to be whatever the published version of the URL is. Then you're also going to have a link to your Replit project, and then you're going to make a OpenLab post as well. So actually, I'll do that later. Let's get started on this. In the second half of class, I'll just review submitting the project, but that's going to be pretty much just review of stuff that we've done before. So I'll leave that for the second half of class. I'll stop here.